Welcome everybody back into NerdSesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber and alongside me is Logan Camden. And today we are continuing our NFL season previews. We just knocked out the NFC North yesterday. You can go ahead and check that out. Today, Logan, we will be talking about the lowly NFC South. And this is a race to the top of the sewer, if you will. So with that in mind, Logan, which lucky team will be winning the NFC South this year?
I have the Atlanta Falcons. I have them at a record of 10-7, and I thought last year this was one of the most talented teams in football with two glaring weaknesses: the quarterback position and the edge rusher position, and I thought they addressed them pretty well. So my first question for this team is, how much better is this offense going to be with Kirk Cousins and a new offensive coordinator? And I stress that too, just because I think Arthur Smith was a little bit overwhelmed with head coaching duties and offensive coordinator duties. I also just don't think he maximized all the talent that he had. I think Bijan Robinson is a bell cow running back. I am feeding that man this entire year. He is the number one guy. I'm getting him as many touches as possible. And I still think the Falcons have a lot of weapons at their disposal. Guys like Drake London, Kyle Pitts. I think there's a higher level that those guys can reach, again, with a new offensive coordinator and hopefully a quarterback that can actually push the ball downfield and make plays. I think Desmond Ridder is just not a starter in the NFL. I mean, they turned to Taylor Heineke last year, so Kirk Cousins is a no-brainer upgrade at that position. It is a little concerning, an older quarterback coming off of a knee injury. You know, it's always a little concerning, but I still think he's going to be better than Desmond Ridder was last year. It was pretty putrid.
Hot take.
Yeah, piping hot.
Piping hot.
They were the number 26 scoring offense last year, the number 27 offense in terms of points per drive, number 22 in offensive yards per drive. Again, man, Kirk Cousins, probably about, I used to call him the equator. I think he's probably slightly above the equator. He's a slightly above average quarterback. It's going to be a big, big improvement from Desmond Ridder. So I think we should see this offense maybe not leap into top 10, but they should definitely be above average next season. And then I asked the question, how much better will Raheem Morris make this defense? He was the head coach in Tampa from 2009 to 2011. This is his second shot at a starting job in the NFL. And he's been the defensive coordinator for the Rams since 2021. And this defense was all right last year. They were number 7 in defensive yards per drive. They had the number 10 passing defense in yards per attempt and the number 9 rushing defense in terms of yards per attempt. Now, I don't love this D-line. I like Grady Jarrett. I don't love this linebacking core, but I like the secondary, and they add Matt Judon. Judon only played 4 games last season because of a torn lower bicep, but he's got 32 sacks in his last 38 games. He has been one of the most consistent edge rushers in all of football. This just went down yesterday. I think, Carson, he's going to be their best edge rusher since maybe Vic Beasley, man, and that's a long, long time ago. So when I look at this group, I think this is the most talented team in this division. I think they have the best offensive line in this division. I think they have the best quarterback in this division. Mm-hmm. They've got the best weapons in the division.
Yeah.
And I think they addressed their 2 biggest weaknesses. So this is a race to the top of the sewer, as you said, man. This is a sludgy, nasty division. It reminds me of the NFC least back in the early 2010s. Somebody's got to win it, and I think the Falcons are going to win it at 10-7.
Yeah, and I think that they're going to be better than the Bucs and Saints teams that we saw scrapping for this division last year. No disrespect to your boy Baker, Logan, and the magic that he pulled off, but this team is just way more talented. Kirk is automatically a huge upgrade over the absolute bums who they had last year. Like, it was insane how much quarterback play limited. Then they end up overall 17 touchdowns to 17 picks, under 3,800 yards from their quarterbacks combined, mostly Heineke and Ridder. Like, just awful, awful quarterback play. I'm not too worried about the injury for Kirk just because, like, mobility is not a big component of his game. He's old, but he has been basically peaking. We certainly haven't seen him regress in the last few years, and he was playing his best football ever probably last year. He was averaging 291 yards per game, 18 touchdowns to just 5 picks in 8 games as a starter. He's one of the most reliably good starters in the NFL, just outside that top 10 conversation, but always going to produce, especially when you give him weapons. And I'm very excited to see Kyle Pitts and Drake London unlocked by an actual quarterback in a scheme that is willing to utilize them more, especially in the case of Pitts. I do think the rest of their receiving core kind of sucks, though, and I think that There are some pretty clear holes in this Falcons team. As much as we can look at the high-end talent and it's exciting, there are questions about depth, and there are questions about starters in certain position groups. Like Darnell Mooney as your wide receiver too, he'll be your third option, but that's not very good in my opinion. Ray McCloud is not an actual receiver. That's a return man. That's a gadget guy at best. I don't know, man. I don't want him being my wide receiver 3, that's for sure. So I do think that's a concern, but great line, really effective rushing attack, top 3 running back in football. Algier is a very good guy to have in the backfield, but Bijan should take a more overwhelming share of the carries this year. So they're very talented offensively. It should be a good offense. And I like this defense a good bit. They were already top 10 in passing and rushing yards allowed per attempt last year. And Judon is a huge add, as you mentioned. Just giving up a third for him, I think, is a big win. Edge rusher has been a clear need for them. And now I like their front overall. I think Grady Jarrett is good. I think Onyemata is solid. They just needed that difference-making pass rusher. And I think that they got him, and they drafted very heavily for depth in that front 7 this year. Braylon Trice, their third-round pick, did tear his ACL, so that's a loss in that regard. I don't think it's a loaded front, but I think it's a good front. As you mentioned, I think that you have a couple studs in the secondary with A.J. Terrell, with Jesse Bates. I do worry a bit about that second safety spot, and I'm also a bit worried about the linebacking core. So I think they're good, but again, I see holes on both sides of the ball that keep them from being an elite team, in my opinion. It's a pretty easy schedule. They play the Eagles and the Chiefs early. Those should be losses probably, but you get to face the bottom of the NFC East, which is weak. You get to face the bottom of the AFC West, which is weak. And you get to play your own shitty division 6 times a year. So that's where I see them getting to 10 wins. I'm with you. I don't think they have the ceiling of the elite teams in the NFC, of the elite teams in the league. And I have a big problem with philosophically what they're doing right now, which we can get to in a minute. But for this year, they should absolutely win their division. If they don't, it's a disaster.
They should. You mentioned some of the holes in this roster. It sucks for them. They added Rondale Moore, but he's going to be out for the season, right? He was supposed to be their number 2. Mooney would be the number 3. So just circumstance, that hurts. I do like the depth pieces that they added to. Another one, Eddie Goldman, another defensive depth lineman from Chicago. He's been solid too. Yeah, they're a solid team, and I think you hit on a big thing there, man. Like when we're looking at this beyond their division, because that's not the goal, right? The goal is to go out there and to win playoff games. And so I think the path isn't with an elite defense. I think this defense is going to be average to above average. It's probably going to be the back on the back of Kirk Cousins. And that is, honestly, Kirk playing at the level he was last season. Like, Kirk was balling out. It was the Vikings that were just allowing touchdown after touchdown and playing themselves out of football games and having to have Kirk put on these superhuman performances to keep them in it. So I think if this team is going to go and make some noise in the playoffs, win a playoff game, I think it would have to be on the back of a superhuman performance from Kirk, from Pitts, London. Yeah, I think that's what it would have to be. It's this offense just going berserk altogether. And
that's interesting. I don't know if I totally agree. I mean, the defense was obviously the strength of the team last year. I think they have some real high-impact playmakers there. I don't see a big disparity in terms of how good I expect them to be offensively versus defensively. And even within the offense, it's like this has been an incredibly run-heavy offense. And I think that changes with Kirk. I think that changes in a post-Arthur Smith world as well. But I still think they can run the damn ball. They still have one of the top 5 offensive lines in football and a top 3 running back. So I don't view it as a spot where it's like Kirk is ever going to really have to backpack them. The question is more just, are they an elite enough football team to not need Kirk to ever take that level up to go toe-to-toe with the best quarterbacks in the league?
That's what I mean. That's what I think it's going to take for them to win a playoff game. I think he's going to have to outduel guys. And you make a good point. I didn't mean it to say that he's going to have to shoulder the load the entire year. I think they're going to be really balanced. But when push comes to shove, when it comes playoff time, I think it's going to be Mr. Primetime himself, Kirk Cousins, having to step up to the table and be the guy that puts them over the top and actually wins them playoff games. And we finally saw him get that monkey off his back a couple of years ago against New Orleans. But that has been a shortcoming of Kirk's. But I like this team. Again, I think they are just so far and above the most talented team in this division. Not that they're going to run away. Like, the difference between the best team in this division and number 3 is like 3 games to me. So I think it's going to be close, but I think the Falcons should win it.
I think they're a clear favorite, but I do still really dislike where they're at, ironically, just because I think that this whole Kirk and Penix situation is a disaster. I think that paying Kirk Cousins $45 million a year for at least 3 years, that is the guarantee, while you have potentially the most valuable asset in football, that being a highly drafted quarterback on a rookie deal, and you have, again, the roster around either quarterback, maybe not to contend right now, but what if you weren't dedicating that cap to Kirk and you could go out there and add another splashy star talent or two because you're not committing cap to the quarterback position? We talk about this so much, but like these quarterback mega contracts for non-elite quarterbacks are killer. They limit you as a team arguably more than anything else. And Kirk's cap hit in 2026, 2 years from now, is over $57 million. So that in a vacuum, we know is probably problematic in terms of team building. But in the moment when they gave Kirk that money, I was okay with it because it was like, hey, I get it. You have talent. The quarterback position has been a disaster. Go out there, make the playoffs. That's something. But what makes it unjustifiable to me is when you then go take your most prized asset, the 8th pick in this year's draft, and instead of spending it on win now position talent, you go and you draft a quarterback. And not just any quarterback, a 24-year-old quarterback who I don't think is a project, who a lot of people, myself included, would say you overdrafted at number 8, that was probably a bit of a reach. And here you are still paying this slightly above average quarterback, elite quarterback money. That's just where I think it's idiotic team building. Like, they'll make the playoffs, but that's it. They're not going to win multiple playoff games. I can guarantee that. And they don't have the ceiling to improve unless they were to move off of Kirk, which they're not going to do for 3 years. And then it's like, okay, great. So at best case scenario, we have 1 year of Penix on that rookie deal. And then guess what? If he's good, we have to pay him like an elite quarterback. If he's not good, well, then we wasted the 8th overall pick, didn't even use it for 3 years. And when he did get out there, he sucks. And guess what? Now we're going to rinse and repeat with this whole cycle. I just think they were close, man. They were close. They had stockpiled the talent, and they just chose an illogical path here with this 2 quarterback situation.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I thought it was one of the most head-scratching decisions on draft night. Not only to pay Kirk and then to go draft another quarterback. The draft, I don't think Penix was overdrafted. You know, I heard he was projected to go early 2nd round. I would have taken Penix as one of my first 4 QBs off the board. So I think he would have gone here regardless, but it's the opportunity cost. It's like you hear right after they take Penix that they're trying to trade back up into the teams to go and get an edge rusher because they missed out on it. You know, and then you have all these edge rushers go off the board. If it's Latu, if it's Turner, if it's Chop Robinson, if it's Jared Verse, like all these edge rushers go immediately after you take your guy. And so then you're left with the question, if you guys really wanted an edge rusher that bad, why didn't you just take it at pick 8? Right. You already got a quarterback, right? And then you already look at their backup, Taylor Heineke. You say what you want about him. He's a solid enough backup. And then you couple that with the fact that I think that Michael Penix was arguably the most pro-ready quarterback prospect in this class, with his age, with his years of experience in college, with his ability to throw in a pro-style offense like we saw at Washington.
And he's accurate. He's not a particularly high-end athlete. He's not an exceptional arm talent. Like, it's not like there's a lot of raw upside that you haven't tapped into there.
And the bigger thing to me is the age and the contract thing, like you mentioned. Yeah. If you had taken a guy like Sam Darnold, for example, when he came out and he's, I think he was 20 or 21, right? Maybe that guy should sit because at the end of it, he's going to be 24 and he might need some years behind a good veteran to learn. Again, Penix is ready to go, and then you mentioned the contract thing. It's a double-edged sword. Okay, well, you might have your franchise guy, but again, you're wasting the prime years where, again, you could have allocated that money that you paid Kirk to somebody else on the free agent market, and you could have had a quarterback on a cheap contract and let him grow naturally with this team. So, yeah, ironically, in a lot of ways, you're going to be good this year, but they may have screwed themselves for the future. I don't really see any super bright future for any of these teams in the NFC South, but yeah. There's no real route to the Falcons making a real playoff push to me. And for a lot of teams, that's not the case. But you want to have that kind of ceiling, and I just don't see that with this group. And I agree with you. I think that they have screwed up this timeline a little bit. And also, you've also added in another variable of a little bit of drama. I talk about this with any quarterback where you've got a good backup quarterback. Say Kirk Cousins isn't the best coming off that Achilles injury, man. Any fan base is rabid. And you have a bad 3 to 4 game stretch. You know how it is in the middle of the NFL season, man. People turn on those blinders. We forget about the rest of the year. We forget about everything that we knew before. And we zero in on these 3 to 4 weeks that we're a part of. And then people will go, oh, it's time to see Penix. Kirk has a bad couple of games. Maybe he craps his pants on prime time like Kirk likes to do.
Yep.
And then we get the big Penix crowd coming out of the woodwork. So I agree with you on that, man. I think they screwed the pooch a little bit with their timeline.
Backup QB is always the favorite man in any city until he gets on the field and it turns out that there's a reason that he's the backup. But I think a short-term deal for a win-now quarterback like Kirk would have made perfect sense if they were intending to draft a quarterback highly. To know that you have 3 full years in which Penix is going to be sitting on the bench, letting that extremely valuable rookie contract waste away while you have a good roster, but could have a great roster if you weren't dedicating that money to Kirk, and Penix could be a solid starter, right? Like, I don't know that the difference in cap between Kirk and Penix would reflect the difference in ability at all. That's the whole upside of having a rookie quarterback who can play and being able to assemble a great roster around him. It's a great formula to winning a Super Bowl. In fact, there's really only 2, basically, right? You have a quarterback who plays at a top 5 level and justifies their contract, or you have a elite roster and you're not really dedicating any cap to the quarterback position because he's on a rookie deal.
Yeah, look at the dynamic between the Chiefs and the 49ers in the Super Bowl last year. It's exactly like that. The one caveat I want to add to save our asses from this being a stone cold take, the only scenario in which this is a good decision by having that security blanket is if Kirk gets injured in the midseason and you do have Penix on reserve to just go in, plug and play. So that's the only way, in my opinion, in which this is you can really justify this decision.
Yeah, I'm not going to save my ass. I don't hedge my bets, buddy. I don't think that the probability of that justifies this sort of misuse of resources, in my opinion. So congratulations, Falcons. You'll win the division. If you don't, good God, then this is an unspeakable disaster class. Okay, who is next in this pile of shit, Logan?
Number 2, I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I want them to win this division. I'm going to be actively voting for my baby boy, Baker Mayfield.
Of course you are.
I have them going 8-9, and I think the Bucs have a pretty high floor. I really trust Baker as a leader of this team, as a leader of this offense. I trust the combination of talent they have in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Rachaad White. And I really trust the defensive culture and identity that the Buccaneers have built behind head coach Todd Bowles and defensive coordinators Foote and Rodgers. The thing about this team, they suffered some very massive losses in this offseason. Along with Baker Mayfield having this career resurgence in this new spot was the introduction of their offensive coordinator, Dave Canales. I think Canales deserves an immense amount of credit for what he did with this offense, and that's a really big loss, man. I think it is a huge benefit to Carolina that he's going to go there and hopefully mentor Bryce Young. I think the guy just has an ear for quarterbacks, has a knack for getting them really maximizing what he can get out of them with his offensive system and bringing them along. Canales wasn't the only loss, though. You lose Shaq Barrett. You lose Devin White. You lose Carlton Davis. I mean, those are 3 starters and 3 real high-impact players on this defense. And so that's why I'm expecting a regression. It's not like this team had a convincing 9-win season last year. The Bucs eked out 9 wins in a division victory. And so, honestly, I played with the Bucs going between 7-10 and 8-9. I'm going to go with the high end. I believe in Baker. I believe in the defensive culture. But again, this team suffered big losses. And they retained 2 major pieces, too. I want to give them props for bringing back Baker Mayfield and bringing back Mike Evans. If they had lost Mike Evans, I think this is probably a 5 or 6 win football team here. But they lose some major assets in their defense, and that matters to me. So I could see this team between 7 and 8. I'm going to go with the high end and hope that they eke out 8 wins here.
I have them going 7-10. And listen, there's probably no team that I was more wrong about last year than the Bucs. I believe I picked them to win 4 games.
I think, and I quote, you said they were going to be the worst team in football.
I don't remember. I might have said that. I think I did have them last in this division, to be fair. I know that I had like the Panthers right there with them, 5-12. But I was super wrong about the Bucs, and you were super right about the Bucs, and you were super right about Baker Mayfield. This year, we're not so far apart. I just don't see how they improve. I think the defense takes a bit of a step back. I'm worried about the Shaq Barrett loss. This was already one of football's weaker pass rushes. You lose your best pass rusher. I also think that corner's a big question mark after losing Carlton Davis. And I don't see how the offense gets any better. Baker played his best football ever last year. Mike Evans, at 30 years old, played arguably his best football ever last year. Neither he or Godwin missed a single game for a receiving corps that, if they had, would have struggled because they definitely lacked depth as a group. And they add Jalen McMillan in the 3rd round this year to that receiver room out of Washington. I think he's an upgrade at wide receiver 3, but still not a high-impact guy as a rookie, in my opinion. So I think they're still very reliant on those 2 vets. The line isn't great. They lose Dave Canales. I like Rachaad White as a receiving target out of the backfield, but as a runner of the football, especially behind this offensive line, we've consistently seen him struggle to be efficient. I mean, Tampa Bay was dead last in terms of yard per rush attempt last year, and they were +8 in the turnover margin, which is a little bit fluky, and I wouldn't expect that to remain the case. I also did think that as quirked up as Baker was last year, Logan, as swagged out as he was, as many big nuts throws as he made, I can recall a few games in which some balls were put in harm's way, and it was just kind of a magical season. Things went the Bucs' way. But if I had to guess, I would say Baker plays a little bit worse than last year. The defense is a little bit worse. And that, to me, accounts for a 2-win drop-off from last year.
Yeah, the offensive line point's a good one to point out, too. They do invest in it in the draft. They draft Graham Barton in the 1st round to tackle. I think he should boost them up a little bit. But
I'm not sure he's going to start, though.
I would. I mean, damn, dude, they suck. The big issue is just running the ball. And that's where I get a little nervous about Baker. When you don't have... And I know that Rashad rushes for 900 yards. God bless that boy. He's a great runner of the football. If he was behind a competent offensive line, I think he could crack 1,000 yards rushing. But that's the scary part. A 2nd consecutive year where you really can't trust, and you're putting the entire load of the offense basically on Baker Mayfield every single game. And I love Baker. But that's a huge burden, man, for a guy like him, right? Patrick Mahomes can do it. Josh Allen can do it, right? The one-of-ones can do it. You're asking an average to an above-average quarterback to shoulder the entire load of your offense behind a mediocre offensive line with not a deep receiving core. It's a lot to ask, man. And when I think the defense is going to take a step back, and you mentioned the turnover margins, it's a recipe that I'm not super convinced in working out. And I think this division's gotten a little bit better. And the margins are really thin between these teams. But when the margins are thin and I see this team regressing a little bit, I'm expecting a little bit of a letdown. Like you said, I just don't know where the Buccaneers tangibly really improved from last season.
When you don't get better, you get worse, man. That's how it goes. They are a team that feels very mediocre across the board, and that means 7 wins feels about right.
So is this team 3 for you in the division, or are they 2?
No, I have them 2nd in the division. I think this division fucking sucks, man. You're talking about it getting a little bit better. I don't know. I think the Falcons are better. I think this division is pretty bad, man. Pretty exceptionally bad. My one concern for the Bucs is if last year suckered them just a tad into avoiding the hard rebuild. Because I don't think the Baker contract is a bad dollar value, right? In fact, it's amazing to be able to get a legit starter in that sort of mid-market value that we've talked about disappearing. And having these guys who are just slightly above average demanding to be paid as though they are elite quarterbacks, they avoided that with Baker. And they bring back Mike Evans. It's just like, I don't know that it gets better than it did last year. And if that's the case, it might just be better going into the full slide, leading into it, not really having any of your meaningful cap dedicated to these guys.
I'm never a supporter of the blow it up unless the writing's really, really on the wall. I think for New Orleans, ironically, I think the writing is kind of on the wall for them. But you could be right. They have now locked themselves into this new 3-year window where, if I'm looking at this objectively,
what's going to happen?
This is not a contending roster, right?
Yeah.
Overall, top to bottom. I don't think Todd Bowles is that good of a coach. I think him winning 9 wins got him to stick around. He could have been fired. And if Baker does regress again, man, you're just locked into real mediocrity likely for the next 3 seasons, which is never where you want to be as a sports franchise.
No, it's not. And obviously they weren't going to be drafting highly last year, so it's fine. I'm fine with them paying Baker. I'm just looking at this right now and thinking, when are we going to feel better about the Bucs under Baker Mayfield than we did in 2023 when they were a very scrappy 9-win team? You know, I don't really see that on the horizon for them. Throw another shrimp on the barbie. Get in on all the UFC 305 action live from the land down under at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of UFC. The middleweight title's on the line for the main event, but the card is stacked full of rip snorter blokes and Sheilas.
And speaking of stacked, if you're new to DraftKings, listen up. New customers bet $5 to get $150 instantly in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you just bet $5. UFC 305, it's going to be a ripper of a good time. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Okay, it only gets worse from here, though, Logan. Who's third in the NFC South?
I have the New Orleans Saints. I have them going 7-10, and this is an older roster with a relatively high floor. This was a rock-solid defense last year, and I think they improved on the margins. They were number 8 in scoring, they were number 6 in defensive points per drive, and they were number 8 in defensive yards per drive. This is behind mostly the old guard, Cam Jordan, one of the best linebackers in football still in Demario Davis, and Tyrann Mathieu in the back of this defense. He had a 60.6 passer rating when targeted last year. He's still elite in coverage. Carl Granderson had a breakout year last year, got paid. He was 29th in pressures, had 8.5 sacks. And also behind him, part of this new guard, you have Marshawn Lattimore and Pete Werner. And then they add Willie Gay Jr., another solid addition to the linebacking core, and they add Chase Young. So I think this defense, that was really good, is going to get better. So why do I have them winning 7 football games? I just don't trust Derek Carr to win a meaningful football game. That was my take last year. I don't trust Derek Carr. I still don't trust Derek Carr. Carson, their wins last season. Ryan Tannehill. Mac Jones. Gardner Minshew. Tyson Bagent. Tommy DeVito.
No way.
Baker Mayfield. Desmond Ridder. And they beat Bryce Young twice.
That's actually insane.
Right?
That is actually insane.
That is luck of the draw, man. The damning stat about Derek Carr, this team was 1-8 when the defense allowed over 18 points. And when you look at the footage,
it's horrifying.
I don't like Derek Carr's pocket presence. I don't like the way he reads the field. I think he is bad. And he wasn't, man. Derek Carr was legitimately good at a point in his career. I don't want to completely wipe away the good years that we got out of Derek Carr. He's too conservative. I don't like his pocket presence. I think he sees ghosts like Sam Darnold in the pocket sometimes. And so, that's where I draw it, man. Like, I just don't trust Derek Carr to lead out a good offense, man. I think they have a poor offensive line that they've been trying to rebuild over the past few years. I think they've got decent skill talent, Olave, Kamara. But Derek Carr, man. And then when I look at the schedule, all of their wins that I marked down is basically against subpar quarterbacks that I like less than Derek Carr. I think it's going to be very similar to last year. So, yeah, I think this team wins 6 or 7 games because of the faith I have in this defense. I'm going to give them 7.
I wouldn't put as much on this on Derek Carr as you are. I have them winning 6 games. I think that Derek Carr is, at this point, a slightly below average starting quarterback. I don't think that he's really going to mess things up for you necessarily, but I don't think that he's going to go out there and win you games. However, my problems with the Saints are just about this offense as a whole. Like, if you put Derek Carr with not good personnel, well then, yeah, your offense is going to be bad. He's not going to save you from that. But he's not like one of the weaker parts of this offense. They were an average passing offense last year. They were 31st in rushing yards per attempt. Really struggled to run the ball. Their line sucks. Ryan Ramczyk out for the year. They've lost Andrus Peat, who isn't as good as he used to be, but still a starter. So they need Fuaga to be a stud. I think this is going to be one of the worst offensive lines in football. Outside of Olave, I mean, you mentioned the skill position talent, right? There's 2 guys. Outside of that, it sucks. And Kamara, again, hasn't been efficient, hasn't been effective running the football. He's just been effective as that receiving back, really. And the receiving core is depressing outside of Olave. Rashid Shaheed, he's got speed, right? He can give you the explosive play. He's not a down-to-down, reliable number 2 sort of guy. Obviously, Michael Thomas is now gone. I think underratedly sad story of the last decade in football that man went from like having one of the greatest seasons we've ever seen and then never was healthy again. That sucks. That era's over now. I just think they're going to struggle to run the ball. They're going to struggle to protect. And then they're going to lean on Derek Carr in one good receiver. That's a very, very bad offensive formula. Carr is, again, not going to elevate them in my view, but there's a lot of bad stuff around him that makes me concerned more than just Derek Carr on his own.
Yeah, it's more the offensive line than anything else. I personally like Raheem Cheat a lot. I like A.T. Perry. I think they're decent 2s and 3s. The other thing with the Saints, too, and why I expect regression, this team had a massive turnover margin. Like, they were forcing turnovers like
plus
crazy
11
all season long. And again, not that that's not possible to do again, right? If Derek Carr takes care of the football, if his defense is as good as they were last year, but traditionally turnovers, and again, I mentioned all the bad quarterback play, a lot of that had to do with it. That's always a big red flag when we're doing these season previews to me, is if you forced a lot of turnovers one year, it's like the Broncos, and you eked out, 7 or 8 wins, whatever your win total was, when you have that big turnover margin, to me, that's a red flag where I go, that's really hard to repeat. And so that's another reason of why I have the Saints dropping off a couple of games from last year.
I'm with you there. I think that this defense is good. I don't think it's quite as good as the scoring defense might have reflected last year, because I do think turnover margin was a big factor. They were 19th in yards per play allowed, so not as good of a mark. And I think adding Chase Young is huge, because they were a bad pass rush last year. They were 28th in pressure rate. He's a real impact guy there. As you mentioned, there are individual studs here. Demario Davis, Cam Jordan, Marshawn Lattimore, Honey Badger. I think the secondary as a whole is pretty good. But I also think that there are holes here. I think the interior D-line is a hole. I think the linebacker core is meh. DeMario is really good, but overall, So I think it's an above-average defense. Not a great one. Probably not quite top 10. But I think it's a well below-average offense. And we'll see, man. Maybe they can pick on the weak quarterbacks again. Maybe that's their path to racking up wins. Because, again, they also are going to get to face the Raiders. They're going to get to face, outside of their division, the Broncos. A lot of people think Bo Nix is the savior. That's still not a good football team. They're going to get to face the Giants. They're going to get to face Washington, and they're going to get to face their own division. So if there's a path to them winning 8 games again, that's it to me. It's a fake 8 wins. It's a weak schedule, shitty schedule 8 wins. And even then, I'm not going to give it to them, because you know what? I think that they're not good, and I don't view them as strong favorites in really any of those games. And I think any good team is going to take care of them easily, because I don't think they have the upside to pull off those sort of upsets.
I completely agree. That's the range that I consider the Saints in. I think that they should eke out wins against mediocre to bad teams, and I think the actual good teams are going to destroy them. They should crush New Orleans.
Yeah, they're in a weird, rough transitional period, man.
It sucks for them, dude. They have been in cap hell for the past, 2 years, and they are still in cap hell. I believe they have the worst, I think they're the most in negative cap in all of the NFL. Once they get out of that, that's when they can actually start making moves to improve this roster, but they're middling right now, as is the rest of this division.
Yeah, I think that they'll probably want to get off Carr after next year. I don't think Dennis Allen is making it through the Derek Carr contract. And then I think that we're going to see an actual hard reset rebuild from this team, which is really what they've needed since Breeze left. They had the win now roster in place, and so it's like they could hang on. They could be an average football team, but it's getting worse. I think that this is going to be the worst Saints team that we've seen in quite some time. But Logan, still not as bad as the Carolina Panthers. What is your prediction for them this year?
I have them at 5-12 right now. I may call an audible as the previews go along. I might change it to 4-13. But hey, the good news is the Panthers may double or even triple their win total from last year, baby. Big news. The silver lining is the offense has to get better, man. The weapons last year.
Can't get worse.
Adam Thielen, Jonathan Mingo, Tommy Tremble, Chuba Hubbard. Oh, Tommy Tremble and Chuba Hubbard, unfortunately, are back. But they trade for Deontay Johnson. They drafted
Wait, did you
Xavier
mention
Legette.
1,000-yard receiver Adam Thielen?
Yeah, I mentioned Adam Thielen.
1,000-yard receiver Adam Thielen? How about that in the big 2023?
At 33 years of age,
Somebody's got to catch the ball.
Before I get into the rest of this, I want to be clear about something. There are a lot of people that think Deontay Johnson is a number one receiver in the National Football League. Ooh. I staunchly believe that Deontay Johnson is a number two in this league. And I'll go ahead and I'll spoil it for you Carolina Panthers fans. This is what you're going to see. He is a good route runner. I think Deontay Johnson is a good route runner. People call him great or one of the best in the league. That is hyperbolic. Deontay Johnson is a good route runner. He's going to make you very angry with a couple of things, though. He's going to drop some passes. And that got overblown, I think, a little bit last year. Deontay Johnson, 2 years ago, dropped everything. Couldn't catch a cold. Last year, he got better. Had, I believe, one of the lowest drop pass rates, but he was still dropping passes. So Deontay's going to drop some balls. My biggest issue with Deontay Johnson is when he catches the ball, he runs backwards. That is the most frustrating thing about him on tape is he tries to dance. He tries to cut back on field. He is going to routinely lose you 3 or 4 yards trying to make big plays out of nothing when he should just run as forward as he can get and go down. DJ's not a number one, guys. And he may get the volume because I know at the end of this, people may clip this or tweet at me. Oh, Deontay had 1,200 or 1,300 yards and he had 4 TDs and
it would be sickos. You'd have to be in the trenches to remember Logan's Deontay Johnson take, and when he gets 1,001 yards in the Panthers offense, clip it.
And he
I
has
don't think that's going to happen.
And he has 100 catches. I think he may produce at that level. Deontay Johnson is not a number one receiver. He's not the savior. I still think the Panthers need to invest more heavily in that to get Bryce Young some more help. I think long-term, maybe it could be Legette. I like Legette a lot. I also love his accent.
I knew you were going to say something about that.
Dude, I could listen to Legette talk about anything, man. I think I could listen to Legette literally talk about anything.
Logan, you should just let your accent out at all times. Let's be honest. You're masking who you are from the people.
Oh, no, I mask it every episode, man. I mask it every episode.
And it's sad. We got to get you out here like you're on the phone with your old man talking about the Steelers.
I have to enunciate properly. For that, I have to get rid of the country accent, man.
Sad code switching.
Last year, the Panthers had 8 double-digit losses. It was frankly embarrassing, and they only forced 11 turnovers all year. That was dead last in the league. They lost a real difference maker in Frankie Louvu. They added a couple of edge rushers. The reality is this roster is just really far away, man. I think they need to continue overhauling this offensive line. I think they need to add real top-end playmakers for Bryce to get the ball to. I think they desperately need a running back for him. And they need to invest in basically all of their defense. Reliable edge rushers. They had Jadeveon Clowney. They had, I think it's Warren. Yeah, what's the guy's name? They had, I wrote him down here. They had Wanham in here. He had a fluky year last year. They had him in. They need to add impact linebackers. And they need to add any defensive backs. I know they have J.C. Horn. In 3 seasons, J.C. Horn, I think, has played in under or just about 20 games. I mean, he has struggled to stay on the field. So this roster is really far away. Basically, it's what you're going to get out of Bryce Young. That's kind of going to determine if this season is a success or not. They're not winning this division. I don't think they're surpassing 6 wins. I will eat these words gladly if they do.
Eat them up.
It is about seeing improvement from Bryce Young and seeing what Dave Canales can do for him and building a culture here in Carolina. They're really, really far away, man. And frankly, they screwed the pooch by trading away that number 1 pick and trading away DJ Moore. I mean, if they don't do that, they could have Caleb Williams right now. They could have DJ Moore. And they could actually be building something. But they are starting from a deficit. And again, man, I think this roster just needs a complete overhaul, basically top to bottom. Their only building block to me is Derek Brown, who last year, with as much as the defense was on the field, he got the most tackles by a defensive tackle in NFL history. That's an accomplishment, man. I think Derek Brown's a real difference maker, but he's the only real one on this roster.
Is Bryce Young a building block for them, Logan?
If you ask me right now, I would say no. I think Bryce Young could be an average quarterback in the National Football League. Like, I think he could be an average starter at his apex. That's how I felt about him in the draft. I thought maybe he could be above average after seeing a year from him. Also, I will give him some grace. I mean, this is one of the most abysmal situations in all of football.
100%.
Dude, I think you could have
It's the worst. It's the worst.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, dude. You could have put one of the top-notch quarterbacks. You could have put Jordan Love here. You could put C.J. Stroud here, and I think they would have struggled. Bad offensive line that doesn't buy him or the receivers any time. No receivers that win convincingly in one-on-one. No running game. I mean, you're asking the guy to come in here and be Superman, and those expectations are just way too large. So, right now, I would say Bryce Young is not a building block for the Panthers, but this year is going to be, it's going to determine. It reminds me a lot, honestly, Carson, of Jared Goff, his first year with Jeff Fisher, when he got to start midway through the year in a bad situation and a bad offense. It reminds me of Trevor Lawrence with Urban Meyer after his first year in Jacksonville. It reminds me of those situations. So this year is going to be the real gauge on if Bryce Young is a building block. But if you put me in a corner, I would say, no, he's probably not. He's probably an average starter at best.
I think that I am pretty close to you on this. I think that the Panthers are going to be really, really bad again this year. And I think that they have improved, right? They've invested in the offensive line with Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis. They've invested in receiver with Deontay and with Leggett. And I think that Leggett has to hit. Like, he has to be your number one, right? Because you do not have that sort of potential with Deontay. I agree. You certainly don't have it with fucking Adam Thielen. So, is he even on the team anymore? I don't remember.
Why is Thielen catching strays, man? Adam Thielen was undrafted and walked on in college, man.
Old washed.
They're saying
no separation.
He is there, but the big rumor is that Thielen's going to get traded.
Yeah, trade him. Trade him to who? The fucking Saskatchewan Roughriders? Cut his ass.
What? Where is the Thielen hate coming from? What did Adam Thielen do to you?
I don't hate Adam Thielen at all. I actually like Adam Thielen. I think it's an amazing story. It's just, his NFL career has run its course, right? It was great, and now he can ride off into the sunset. No, it's impressive that he produced. But, again, we're talking about a pretty shitty receiving core that should be better. Well, Leggett has the tools, right? 6'1", almost 230, big body, sub 4.4 speed. I think his ball tracking is good on deep balls. I think he's an impressive contested catcher, and he's got the speed to make plays in the open field. So I'm optimistic about what he can be, and I think he should have a solid rookie season with the upside to be pretty easily the best guy in this room. Bottom line, though, it's still one of the worst receiving cores in football with a clear lack of an actual number one. The line is better. I still don't think it's good. They draft Jonathan Brooks in the second round. I'm still not optimistic about the run game behind this line. And I feel like this is going to be one of the worst offenses in football. And I think that tells you something about Bryce Young. It's like you said, not that he is to blame for this, because he has been in the worst situation in football. Not that he's bad, but that he doesn't feel like a difference maker. And obviously, right, we're very early into his career. But I do think although C.J. Stroud would have struggled, he would have been a lot better in Carolina, right? The fact that we're looking at this guy in year 2 and we're still saying, yeah, I think this team is going to win 4 games. That's my prediction. If you put a real high-end talent in there, I think that you would be confident in them being a more respectable football team, because I just don't think that Bryce is going to elevate the guys around him. I think that he is a simple, mostly make his reads inside the pocket. He can move a little bit, but accurate, good processor, right? Basically a game manager. I think that's what Bryce is going to be, and I think in some ways there might be an inflection point for the league with the fact that he went number 1 overall, and he just is so physically limited. That's not to say that CJ was some physical freak, right? But he's bigger, he's stronger. I think that they move similarly well, but it's just, I don't see the upside with Bryce. I don't see it. And not to mention how rattled he often looked last year, that he didn't take good care of the football. And I think you can put that on the situation, but I think that he was the wrong pick in a vacuum. And I worry that that is just going to become exacerbated further and further by the fact that he's playing in football hell, man. He's getting no help around him. A little more help this year. Honestly, a decent bit more help this year. But last year was so bad that was, barely an NFL roster. I'm not optimistic. I think that he is on the trajectory to being an average starter. I'm with you. And in Carolina, that means he might even look worse than that.
I think he's going to be a lot more efficient this year. I really trust Dave Canales with quarterbacks. I think that's his thing. I think he's going to optimize this offense for Bryce's strengths. But when I say that, I think you're looking at a guy, and this is his maxed out version. I think this is the maxed out version of Bryce. I think he's got a little bit more of a live arm than this guy. I think it's Tua. I think you're going to have to gimmick your offense up around the guy. I think you're going to need real playmakers that he can get the ball to in space and on time. And that's a real optimized situation for him. But, that's not normally what you want out of your number one pick. And if you remember, Carson, the other thing that makes this Carolina situation worse and why I'm really scared for Carolina in the future, the rumors leading up to the draft, Josh McCown, who was on the Carolina Panthers staff leading up to the draft, said to C.J. Stroud, we're going to take you number one overall. And then apparently David Tepper stepped in very close to draft day and said, I want Bryce Young. And he put his foot down, and that's why they made the call, because he's the owner and they don't want to go against him. The thing that scares me is now that you've missed potentially on the number one pick, say that happens 2 to 3 years from now, we go, the Panthers' entire team is too far away, Bryce is not the guy we thought he was, then you will have effectively wasted a number one pick, wasted away the greatest quarterback prospect I've ever seen in Caleb Williams, because you gave them the pick that turned into. You gave away DJ Moore. You lost Brian Burns because you weren't competitive, also with the Brian Burns situation. You traded him for less value than you would have gotten from the Rams. The Rams reportedly offered 2 first-round picks. And then you were in the course of losing your only other building block in Derek Brown. And so there's a very high probability that 2 to 3 years from now, we're doing this pod again, Carson, and the Panthers are right back at the cellar with 0 building blocks on their roster, and they have to completely hit the reset button again because of organizational incompetence, front office failures, and yeah, that's it. Those are the 2 components. I don't want to see that happen in Carolina for Matt Sponhour's mental health and for Bryce Young's sake. But this is the year, man. This is the year to me that we're going to learn a lot. Again, I think Dave Canales is the guy that I'm looking to really optimize this offense for Bryce and maximize what we can get out of him. I think he's going to be better. Oh, that's obvious. I don't know how much worse Bryce can be next year.
Yeah.
I think Bryce is going to be more efficient. I think he's going to be better. But how much better? Are we looking at a bottom 10 starter in the league, or are we looking at a average starter in the league?
This year, yeah. If he were average this year, that'd be a lot of growth. Man, I'd be impressed by that. I'm concerned, dude. He's very short, 5'10", obviously, which is insane for a number one pick. He's slight, and golly, he took a lot of hits last year.
Second most in the league.
A lot of hits, man.
Behind Sam Howell.
I wonder if his path has to be using his legs more, which has never been his play style, but God, I just worry about him hanging in the pocket with his limitations physically. It's like outside of processing the game, which he didn't do at a high level last year, but that's what he should do at a high level. Like, what is he doing at a high level? He's quick, right? I think he's estimated to have like a 4.5 40. It's just he's selective with his legs.
Yeah, and it's not his tendency.
It's not. He's got the mentality of a pocket passer, but I don't know that he's a good enough pocket passer.
That's the problem. When you couple that with the fact that he doesn't have a good offensive line, that he's short, right? He can't really see over that. That was a criticism of Russell Wilson, but Russ is a different kind of scrambler, too. The one thing I'll give him grace for, that dude's a tough cookie, man. You take all those hits and you stick in there and you stay on the field and you keep battling. I'll give him mad props for that because that's tough to do, man. We've seen a lot of rookies crumble like that. If it's David Carr, if it's Tim Couch in these abysmal situations stepping into it.
I know. But
Bryce
I'm worried.
At least,
but can we say that he's made it through the storm?
He hasn't. No, the storm is very much still in Carolina.
David Carr showed up for year 2. Tim Couch showed up for year 2, right? They didn't literally die. It just ruined them. And that's what's so hard. That's what's so hard about this.
Exactly.
There is your ability in a vacuum versus a CJ Stroud, right? Versus the other quarterbacks you're going to be compared to. And then there's your situation, which can compound that in a big, big way. Bryce is being done no favors, and I do believe he's the inferior talent to Stroud. So I'm not out on him. It's just the more I think about the trends at this position, the sort of players who dictate the league, the more I think about what we did see from Bryce last year, I become increasingly concerned. And I don't see a lot of growth coming this year from him necessarily or from the Panthers. So the Panthers defense, by the way, I think is going to be worse than last year because last year their defense in some ways was not bad. They were 5th in yards allowed per drive. They were 6th in yards allowed per play. They just forced the fewest turnovers in the league. They weren't great situationally, and they got put in a lot of bad spots by this terrible offense. But now you go from Brian Burns to Clowney. That's a bit of a downgrade. You lose Luvu. You lose Gross Matos. You lose Von Bell. You lose Deion Jones, Jeremy Chin. Like, not all these guys are studs, but they're quality, important, veteran, rotational players at the very least. They lost a lot of meaningful depth pieces and starters from that defense. So I think they take a step back on that side of the ball. And, yeah, I think that they do take a step forward offensively. But, you know, that was a ridiculous thing I was about to say. That was going to be a terrible analogy. Going from the number 31 offense, marginal improvement, you know, it's not exactly going to bring you out of the cellar. Yeah, I was going to say it's like going from shit to a fart. And then I thought, that doesn't sound like something Socrates would say, and I consider myself a modern philosopher. But I guess I went out there and said it anyways.
No, I mean, it's a good point. I mean, what are they going to
No, it's a great point. It's a great analogy.
Are they still going to be a bottom 10 offense? Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Probably. And that's probably
and a bottom
offset.
10 defense.
Exactly. And that's probably offset by the fact that their defense is going to get worse. So I'm with you, man. They thought they were the shit, dude. They're not even the fart.
Yeah, well, that's a different analogy. That's a different poem. I think 4 wins is appropriate. Honestly, I might be closer to 3 than 5. I feel bad.
Yeah,
for I feel
I've
bad for all the Panthers fans.
Now that I've done,
God, and you got to be a Hornets fan too. At least you have Brandon Miller.
Now that I've been through their schedule, I think I might bump them down to 4. But it's 2 more than last year, baby. They doubled up.
They might go with the back-to-back worst team in the league, though. It's not out of the question. Not out of the question at all.
Not at all.
Poor guys. Poor bastards. All right, well, on that note, hope the people of Carolina are all enjoying their summer and are excited for football season. Hopefully, for your sake, we're wrong, and the Panthers win 6 games, which I think would be a smashing success for them. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, the good news is that there is plenty more NerdSesh content. You can listen to all of our full shows across audio platforms. You can watch them on YouTube. And you can check us out on social, TikTok and Instagram at NerdSesh, Twitter at @nerd_sesh to see clips from the show, graphics, and all of our trivia content. You can also join our Discord if you want to chat with the fellas. The link to that is across our social media bios in our link tree, where you can also find the link to our merch. That is at thevolume.com. So check all that out if you want. And with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Brabber.
I've been Logan Camden.
And this was NerdSesh.